Liam's grip on the phone tightened, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Why are you telling me this, Amelia? You've stood by them before." "I know," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I should have spoken up sooner. But I've seen the damage they've caused, and I can't keep pretending it's not happening. They've manipulated me for years, Liam. But this is too much. It's not right. Forgive me if I don't jump to trust you," he said bitterly. "You've always been Eleanor's favorite. How do I know this isn't another one of her schemes?" There was a long pause on the line before Amelia responded, her voice quieter now. "Because I'm willing to prove it. I'll help you. Whatever you need. Information, evidence, anything. Just let me make this right." Liam's instinct was to hang up, to push her away like he had for years, but her tone held something unfamiliar. Genuine remorse. For the first time, he considered the possibility that Amelia might be on his side. "Fine," he said eventually, his tone cautious. "But if you betray me—" "I won't," she interrupted, determination lacing her voice. "I promise." Over the next few days, Amelia worked behind the scenes, feeding Liam crucial pieces of information. Through careful probing, she uncovered the extent of Eleanor's plans, including documents outlining her legal strategy. But as she dug deeper, something far more incriminating came to light. One evening, Amelia called Liam, her voice breathless with excitement. "Liam, you're not going to believe this," she began. "What now?" he asked, weary from the constant tension. "Eleanor's been siphoning money into offshore accounts for years. I found the records. Bank transfers, shell companies, all of it. She's been hiding it from everyone, including Delilah." Liam's eyes widened, a slow smile forming on his lips. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Amelia confirmed. "If this comes to light, it won't just ruin her credibility, it'll destroy her." Yeah. The revelation was a turning point. With Amelia's help, Liam compiled a mountain of evidence: Eleanor's offshore accounts, Delilah's affair, and even the details of their scheme to discredit him. Each piece was meticulously documented, ready to be used when the time was right. Despite their progress, Liam remained wary. One evening, as they reviewed the evidence over the phone, he voiced his concerns. "Amelia, why are you really doing this? Guilt doesn't explain everything." She was silent for a moment before responding, her voice soft. "Because I owe you, Liam. For everything. I saw what Eleanor did to you growing up, the way she belittled you, dismissed you. I stood by and let it happen because I wanted her approval. I didn't realize how much it cost you." Liam's jaw tightened, old wounds resurfacing. "It cost me a lot, Amelia." "I know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I can't change the past, but I can help you now. Please, let me." Her words softened something in him, though he wasn't ready to admit it. "Just stay focused," he said gruffly. "We're not done yet." By the end of the week, Liam had everything he needed. The tables were turning, and for the first time he felt a flicker of hope. Eleanor and Delilah had underestimated him. With Amelia's help, he would make sure they paid for their betrayal. This time, he wasn't just playing defense. He was going on the attack. The plan came together, piece by piece, a web of calculated moves designed to bring Eleanor and Delilah's schemes to light. Liam and Amelia worked late into the night for days, coordinating every detail of their trap. The fake investment firm, registered under a generic but professional-sounding name, was the linchpin. Amelia had insisted on handling the initial contact. She knew Eleanor's pride would prevent her from taking Liam seriously. Armed with fabricated documents and a polished pitch, Amelia approached Eleanor under the guise of an exclusive opportunity to grow her offshore accounts discreetly. "Mother," Amelia began during a carefully staged lunch at an upscale cafe, "I've come across a unique opportunity. A private firm is offering substantial returns for high-net-worth individuals. It's invitation only." Eleanor's eyes narrowed with interest. "Invitation only? Why haven't I heard of this firm?" Amelia leaned forward conspiratorially. "That's the point. They operate discreetly to avoid unnecessary scrutiny. It's perfect for someone like you." Eleanor's lips curled into a small smile. The allure of secrecy and exclusivity was irresistible. "Send me the details. I'll have my people look into it." "Of course," Amelia replied smoothly, masking her satisfaction. "But act quickly. Their spots fill up fast." Within days, Eleanor had taken the bait. The fake firm's portal, designed by Amelia and a trusted tech-savvy contact, looked every bit as legitimate as a high-end investment platform. Eleanor's transfers trickled in, starting small but growing as her confidence in the firm increased. Meanwhile, Liam was preparing the second phase of the plan. A tip-off to the authorities about James's drug use, paired with carefully timed evidence, ensured that James's downfall was imminent. The arrest happened one evening in a dimly lit parking lot. Police swarmed his car, finding enough illicit substances to guarantee charges that would stick. As James was led away in handcuffs, the media caught wind of the story. By morning, news outlets were abuzz with reports of the scandal. For Eleanor and Delilah, the timing couldn't have been worse. Back at the cabin, Liam sat with Amelia, reviewing the latest updates. "James is out of the picture," he said, his voice steady but laced with a quiet satisfaction. "That leaves Delilah and Eleanor." Amelia nodded, but her expression remained tense. "There's something else you need to know." Liam raised an eyebrow. "What now?" Amelia hesitated before handing him a folder. "I've been keeping an eye on Delilah's messages. She's planning to reconcile with you." Liam blinked, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Reconcile? After everything she's done?" "It's not what you think," Amelia said quickly. "She doesn't care about you, Liam. She wants custody of the kids. If she convinces you to let her back in, it strengthens her case." "Yeah." The revelation hit Liam like a punch to the gut. "She's willing to fake a reunion for custody?" he muttered, his hands clenching into fists. "She knows the courts often favor mothers," Amelia explained. "She thinks if she spins a story about forgiveness and rebuilding the family, she can manipulate the system." Liam's jaw tightened, anger simmering just below the surface. "She's underestimated me. Both of them have." The next phase of the trap unfolded seamlessly. As Eleanor funneled more money into the fake firm, Liam and Amelia documented every transfer, every interaction, building an airtight case. The funds were rerouted to a secure account, ready to be returned to the authorities once the trap was sprung. Liam also prepared for Delilah's next move. When she reached out with carefully worded texts, "We need to talk. I've been reflecting on everything." He played along, feigning interest and reconciliation. Each exchange was recorded, further evidence of her manipulation. The final domino fell when Liam invited both Eleanor and Delilah to meet at the same time, under the pretense of working things out. The meeting was staged at a neutral location, a sleek conference room rented for the occasion. Eleanor arrived first, her posture rigid, her gaze sharp. Delilah entered moments later, her demeanor soft and contrite. She clutched a small notebook, a prop meant to symbolize her commitment to self-reflection. "What's this about, Liam?" Eleanor demanded, her tone cold. Liam leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I thought it was time for some honesty," he said, sliding 2 thick folders across the table. "Go ahead, take a look." Yeah. The silence in the room was palpable as they flipped through the documents. Eleanor's eyes widened as she recognized her own transfers to the fake investment firm. Delilah's face paled as she read the transcripts of her messages to Liam. The calculated nature of her manipulation laid bare. "You set us up," Eleanor hissed, her voice trembling with rage. Liam's calm demeanor never wavered. "No," he corrected, "you set yourselves up. I just gave you the rope." Delilah's voice rose, panic creeping into her tone. "You can't use this against us. No judge will listen to you after what you've done." Liam leaned forward, his gaze cold. "You mean protecting my kids? Any judge will see who the real threats are." Then, by the time the meeting ended, both Eleanor and Delilah were reeling, their carefully constructed schemes dismantled, piece by piece. Liam walked out with his head held high, knowing he had turned the tables. The trap had worked perfectly, and their desperation was the ultimate proof of their guilt. This time, Liam wasn't just defending himself. He was taking control, and there was no going back. Yeah. The morning was quiet, almost serene, as Liam sat at his desk in the small cabin. A steaming cup of coffee rested beside him, its aroma filling the air. The calm belied the storm he was about to unleash. His finger hovered over the trackpad, the cursor poised over the send all button. The files were ready. Emails, financial records, text messages, photos, every piece of evidence meticulously organized. With one final breath, he clicked. The first wave of fallout came swiftly. By noon, Eleanor's phone was vibrating incessantly with calls and messages. Her financial advisor, panicked, left a string of voicemails. "Mrs. Peterson, there's been an inquiry into your offshore accounts. Federal investigators have been informed. Call me immediately." Delilah's day wasn't faring any better. As she pulled into her office parking lot, she was greeted by a group of reporters, cameras flashing. "Ms. Peterson? Care to comment on the allegations of fraud?" one shouted, shoving a microphone toward her car. Frozen in shock, she barely managed to reverse and speed away. Yeah. Meanwhile, James sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through the onslaught of emails from former colleagues. His once respected name was now synonymous with scandal. One email, blunt and final, stood out. "Effective immediately, you are permanently terminated from your position. Any severance will be withheld pending investigation." He hurled his phone across the room, the device shattering against the wall. Yeah. As chaos consumed them, Liam remained composed. The news headlines rolled in. Local scandal unfolds. Fraud and betrayal in prominent Peterson family. Followed by exposés detailing Delilah's fraudulent practices and Eleanor's financial schemes. Each article was a nail in their proverbial coffin. That evening, Liam sat with Amelia, watching the fallout unfold on the news. She looked tense, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's happening," she murmured, half to herself. "It is," Liam said simply, his tone steady. The contrast between their emotions couldn't have been starker, his calm resolve against her lingering unease. The next morning, the quiet of Eleanor's estate was shattered by the arrival of federal agents. Their black SUVs lined the driveway, agents in suits fanning out with precision. Eleanor, still in her silk robe, opened the door with forced composure. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. The lead agent held up a warrant. "Mrs. Peterson, we're here to seize assets related to your offshore accounts. Please step aside." The color drained from her face. "There must be some mistake," she sputtered, though her voice lacked conviction. "My accounts are perfectly legitimate." "Then you won't mind us taking a look," the agent replied curtly. Eleanor's protests fell on deaf ears as agents moved through the house, confiscating documents, computers, and anything of value. The neighbors watched from a distance, whispers spreading like wildfire. At the same time, Delilah's world was crumbling. A subpoena arrived at her door, charging her with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. She slammed the door shut, her breathing ragged. The indictment was clear. Her reputation, her career, and her freedom were at stake. Desperate, she called Eleanor, but the line went straight to voicemail. She tried James next, but he didn't answer. Panic clawed at her chest as she realized she was alone in this. And back at Eleanor's estate, the agents were finishing their sweep when Eleanor's gaze fell on a stack of papers on the kitchen counter. Among them was a handwritten note from Amelia, detailing the bank transfers and the setup of the fake investment firm. The realization hit like a sledgehammer. Her hands trembled as she read the words again and again. "Amelia? My own daughter?" she whispered, the disbelief thick in her voice. When Amelia walked into the house later that afternoon, Eleanor was waiting for her, seething. "You," Eleanor hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "You did this. You betrayed me." Amelia squared her shoulders, her expression resolute. "I did what needed to be done, Mother. You brought this on yourself." "Amelia? My own daughter?" Eleanor repeated, her voice rising, as if saying it aloud would somehow make it less true. "After everything I've done for you?" She hated herself for the lie she was telling. "Everything you've done?" Amelia interrupted, her tone sharp. You mean the years of manipulation? The lies? The schemes? No, Mother, you did this to yourself. I just helped it come to light. The confrontation left Eleanor speechless, her world crumbling faster than she could salvage it. Amelia turned and walked out, her head held high, leaving Eleanor alone in the echoing silence of her once grand home. For Liam, justice was finally served. He watched from the cabin as the chaos unfolded, feeling a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. The people who had betrayed him were now reaping the consequences of their actions. But even as the dust settled, Liam didn't revel in their downfall. His focus remained on his children, on the life he was rebuilding for them. This wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming what mattered most. And he had succeeded. Yet, the knock on the cabin door startled Liam. He glanced toward the window, where the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. Wiping his hands on a dish towel, he opened the door to find Delilah standing there, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She was clutching a worn notebook, the same one she had used during their staged reconciliation meeting. "Liam," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to talk to you." He stepped aside reluctantly, letting her into the cabin. She looked around, her gaze lingering on the cozy, unpretentious space, before turning back to him. "I know I've made mistakes," she said, her voice breaking. "Terrible mistakes. But I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I want to make things right. For us. For the kids." Liam leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Make things right?" he echoed, his voice calm but cold. "After everything you've done, you think you can just show up here and fix it all with a few words?" Delilah flinched, but she pressed on. "I was wrong. I see that now. I let ambition blind me, and I hurt the people I love most. But I still love you, Liam. We can find our way back. I know we can." He stared at her, his silence stretching unbearably. Finally, he spoke, his tone sharp and unyielding. "Forgiveness? That's for people who didn't destroy their own family." Delilah's eyes filled with tears, her grip tightening on the notebook. "I'm begging you, Liam, don't do this. Don't shut me out. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us." But Liam's resolve didn't waver. "You gave up on us long before I ever had the chance to," he said. "This isn't about you or me anymore. It's about Ethan and Chloe, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they're safe." The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Delilah collapsed into a chair, her sobs quiet but wrenching. Liam didn't move to comfort her. He couldn't. Too much damage had been done. Meanwhile, at the airport, Eleanor moved through the terminal with brisk efficiency. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, she blended seamlessly into the crowd of travelers. Her luggage contained the last remnants of her once grand life: a few heirlooms, some cash, and false identification. Her plan was simple: disappear overseas and rebuild from scratch. As she approached the security checkpoint, a hand clamped down on her shoulder. She turned, startled, to see two federal agents standing behind her. "Mrs. Eleanor Peterson," one of them said, producing a badge, "you're under arrest for financial fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Please come with us." Eleanor's carefully maintained composure cracked as they placed her in handcuffs. "This is a mistake," she protested, her voice rising in panic. "You have no idea who I am." One of the agents didn't even glance up. "We know exactly who you are." The scene drew the attention of nearby travelers, their curious stares adding to Eleanor's humiliation. As she was led away, her mind raced, searching for someone to blame. Her thoughts landed squarely on Amelia. Back at the cabin, Delilah finally stood, her face streaked with tears. "I wrote you a letter," she said, placing the notebook on the table. "If you won't listen to me now, maybe you'll read it later." Liam glanced at the notebook but didn't reach for it. "There's nothing left to say, Delilah," he replied, his tone firm. "You should leave." She hesitated, as if waiting for him to change his mind, but his gaze didn't soften. With a resigned nod, she turned and walked out the door, her figure disappearing into the twilight. Liam sat in silence for a long time, staring at the notebook on the table. Finally, he picked it up, flipping through its pages. The words were filled with apologies, explanations, and promises he no longer believed. He closed the notebook and carried it to the fireplace. The flames roared to life as he tossed it in, the pages curled and blackened, the words dissolving into ash. It was the last vestige of their connection, and as it burned, Liam felt an unexpected sense of relief. It was over. Truly over. He exchanged a glance with Frosty, who had a mop of dark blonde hair tied back in a ponytail. That night, as he stood on the porch of the cabin, the cool air brushing against his face, Liam looked up at the stars. They seemed brighter, clearer, as if the world itself had been cleansed. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. For himself, for his children. The past no longer held him captive. The ties that bound him to Delilah and Eleanor had been severed, and as the embers in the fireplace died out, so too did the last remnants of their power over him. The morning sunlight filtered through the wide open windows of a modest but cozy home nestled near a wooded trail. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the laughter of children echoing from the backyard. Liam stood at the kitchen counter, flipping pancakes on a griddle. The clatter of silverware and the hum of a radio filled the room, a scene of simple, unadulterated peace. Ethan and Chloe burst in through the back door, their cheeks flushed from the crisp autumn air. Ethan carried a soccer ball under his arm, while Chloe clutched her tennis racket, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Breakfast's ready," Liam called, his voice warm. The kids dropped their gear and hurried to the table, the sound of their chatter filling the room. Liam smiled as he watched them eat, the light in their faces a reminder of why he had fought so hard to rebuild their lives. The weeks turned into months, and the months into years. Liam threw himself into his new role as both father and provider. He took a teaching position at a nearby university, finding solace in sharing his love of history with eager students. The cabin, once a temporary refuge, became their permanent home, a sanctuary where they could heal and grow together. Life wasn't always easy. There were nights when the past crept in, uninvited, bringing with it a tide of old wounds and regrets. But each time, Liam reminded himself of the progress they had made. He focused on the small victories, Chloe mastering a new serve on the tennis court, Ethan acing a math test, their laughter echoing through the house during movie nights. Years later, Liam sat in the bleachers of a high school auditorium, the sound of applause surrounding him. Ethan stood on stage, his cap and gown perfectly straight, a broad smile on his face as he accepted his diploma. Liam's chest swelled with pride, his eyes misting over, as he clapped harder than anyone else in the room. As the ceremony ended, Ethan found him in the crowd. "I did it, Dad," he said, grinning ear to ear. "You did more than that," Liam replied, pulling him into a tight hug. "You made me the proudest dad in the world." A few months later, Liam found himself on the edge of a tennis court, the warm summer sun beating down as Chloe prepared for the final match of her championship. She stood poised, her grip firm on the racket, her expression fierce with determination. Liam shouted from the sidelines, his voice hoarse with excitement. She turned briefly, flashing him a confident smile before serving. The match was intense, but when the final point was scored, Chloe threw her racket into the air, her victory scream echoing across the court. Liam ran to her, scooping her into a bear hug as she laughed, her medal swinging from her neck. "You're incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely incredible." That evening, they sat around a bonfire in the backyard, the soft crackle of the flames filling the night air. Ethan strummed a guitar while Chloe roasted marshmallows, her medal glinting in the firelight. Liam leaned back in his chair, taking in the moment, their faces illuminated by the glow, their laughter pure and unburdened. His thoughts drifted back to the beginning, to the nights filled with doubt and anger, the betrayal that had once consumed him. He thought of Delilah, of Eleanor, of James. Their faces no longer stirred the same bitterness they once had. Instead, they felt like distant memories, shadows of a life he had left behind. Liam rose and walked to the edge of the yard, gazing up at the stars. The sky seemed endless, a canvas of possibilities stretching out before him. He thought of the journey he had taken, the strength he had found in the face of unimaginable pain. The betrayal had broken him, yes, but it had also rebuilt him, stronger, wiser, and more certain of what truly mattered. "Dad?" Ethan's voice called out, pulling him from his thoughts. He turned to see both his children looking at him, their smiles lighting up the night. "Coming," he replied, his voice steady and full of warmth. "Yeah." The finality of their journey struck him in that moment. He wasn't the same man who had once sat at a dinner table, quietly questioning his worth. He had faced his darkest fears, endured the deepest pain, and emerged with a clarity that could only come from surviving the storm. Liam returned to the fire, wrapping an arm around each of his children as they leaned into him. The fire crackled softly, the warmth of the flames a mirror of the love that now defined their lives. A voiceover played softly in Liam's mind, a reflection of everything he had learned. Betrayal breaks us, but it also shows us who we truly are. Liam's story is a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of protecting what truly matters. And as the embers of the fire glowed against the night, Liam knew he had found his peace. The journey wasn't about forgetting the past, but about using it to build a better future for himself and for the two people who mattered most. The folder fell open, and Liam's hands shook as he stared at the damning photos. There was no mistaking it. His wife, Delilah, tangled in a forbidden embrace with his own brother, James. The betrayal burned hot in his chest, but it wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the deceit that had seeped into every corner of his life. His jaw tightened as resolve replaced the shock. They thought they could destroy me? No. They've underestimated the lengths I'll go to protect what's mine. But before we dive deeper into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this gripping tale, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss what's next. The aroma of roasted chicken and buttery mashed potatoes filled the Peterson household, wrapping the family in an almost tangible sense of warmth and comfort. The dining room glowed softly under the pendant light, the flicker of candles casting shadows on the walls. Outside, a gentle snowfall began to dust the suburban neighborhood, blanketing it in serene quiet. Liam Peterson, a 36-year-old high school history teacher, sat at the head of the table, his deep blue eyes crinkled with laughter as his 8-year-old son Ethan animatedly recounted his day at school. Ethan's small hand clutched his fork, which he waved around like a wand as he described his epic save in dodgeball. Beside him, 6-year-old Chloe giggled, her cheeks dimpling as she reached for her juice. Across the table sat Delilah, Liam's wife of 10 years. Her polished appearance, a navy blouse with delicate silver earrings, gave her an air of effortless beauty. She smiled at Ethan's story, but the laughter didn't quite reach her eyes. Every few moments her gaze flicked to her phone, lying face down beside her plate. When it buzzed softly, her hand moved almost instinctively, her thumb swiping to check the notification. Liam's grin faltered briefly as he caught the brief flash of a name. James. His chest tightened, but he masked the unease with another wide smile. "Don't overthink it," he told himself. "It's probably just a coworker." The clink of silverware and the chatter of children filled the room again, but Liam couldn't shake the uneasiness settling in the pit of his stomach. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the living room windows, Liam sat on the edge of the couch, tying his shoes for work. Delilah stood at the kitchen counter, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone, her long fingers perfectly manicured. She looked up briefly, meeting his gaze with a smile that seemed forced, before turning her attention back to the screen. As she walked out of the room, her purse, perched precariously on the kitchen island, tipped over, spilling its contents. A few receipts fluttered to the floor. Liam moved to help gather them, but froze when his eyes landed on one slip of paper. A hotel name. The Willow Inn. was printed in bold at the top, dated 2 nights ago. "What's this?" Liam asked, holding the receipt aloft. Delilah turned, her expression cool and unreadable. "A client dinner," she said casually. "I didn't want to bore you with the details." "A client dinner," Liam repeated, his voice tinged with doubt. "At a hotel?" Delilah chuckled, her tone dismissive. "Yes, Liam. The restaurant there is upscale. Don't make it something it's not." Liam tried to laugh along, forcing himself to brush it off, but the gnawing doubt lingered. Over the next few days, the signs became harder to ignore. Delilah's late-night phone calls stretched longer, her explanations growing vaguer. Work meetings seemed to pile up, always taking place during dinner or over weekends. She'd return home wearing the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne. Desperate for clarity, Liam confided in Eleanor, his mother, who had been staying with them temporarily to help with the kids. She was a stern woman in her 60s, with a knack for finding flaws in every situation. Liam hoped her insight would validate his growing fears. "Mom," he began hesitantly one evening after the kids had gone to bed, "have you noticed anything off with Delilah lately?" Eleanor looked up from her knitting, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you getting at, Liam?" "She's been acting strange. Working late, secretive phone calls. I don't want to assume the worst, but—" He trailed off, unsure of how to put his suspicions into words. Eleanor sniffed, setting her knitting down. "Delilah's an ambitious woman. That's what you wanted, isn't it? A woman with drive, someone who pushes you to do better." Her tone was clipped, her gaze almost disapproving. "Don't ruin your marriage over silly insecurities. Focus on being a good husband." The words stung, and Liam nodded reluctantly, though the doubt refused to leave him. Later that night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Delilah's soft voice drifted from the living room. He tiptoed down the hall, careful not to disturb the children. "You're the only one I can trust, James," she whispered, her voice tinged with something intimate. Liam froze in the shadows, his pulse quickening. The name he had seen on her phone flashed in his mind again. This time, it was impossible to ignore. Yeah. The next morning, Liam sat in his parked car outside a drab office building, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The choice to hire a private investigator felt both alien and necessary. He couldn't shake the image of Delilah's hushed whispers on the phone or the name James haunting his thoughts. His doubts had festered into something he couldn't ignore any longer. With a heavy sigh, he stepped out of the car, the icy wind biting at his face. Inside the office, a small brass plaque on the desk read, "Anderson Investigations." The space smelled faintly of coffee and dust, and the man sitting behind the desk looked every bit the seasoned professional Liam had imagined. Sharp suit, weathered face, piercing eyes. "Mr. Peterson?" the man asked, standing to shake Liam's hand. "I'm Robert Anderson. Let's talk." Over the next few minutes, Liam spilled his suspicions, his voice wavering as he described the changes in Delilah's behavior. Robert listened without expression, nodding occasionally as he jotted notes in a leather-bound notebook. "I'll be discreet," Robert assured him. "If there's something to find, I'll find it." Liam left the office with a mix of relief and dread. He wanted answers, but he wasn't sure he was ready for them. Days passed in a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Then, just as the tension threatened to consume him, the call came. Robert's voice on the other end was calm, almost clinical. "Mr. Peterson, I have what you asked for. Can you meet me at the office?" Liam's hands trembled as he clutched his phone. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Liam arrived, Robert greeted him with a file folder tucked under his arm. They sat across from each other in the same dimly lit office as before. The investigator wasted no time, placing the folder on the desk and sliding it toward Liam. "She's not just meeting him," Robert said, his tone matter-of-fact. "She's staying overnight. Here are the photos." "Photos?" Liam's voice cracked. His heart pounded as he opened the folder. The images were undeniable. Delilah in the arms of another man, the two of them entering a hotel, smiling, intimate. Liam's chest tightened, and a lump formed in his throat. Robert continued, his voice steady. I followed them for 3 days. They're meeting regularly, lunches, evenings, sometimes late into the night. It's clear this isn't just a casual relationship. The words struck Liam like a physical blow. His mind raced, cycling between anger, hurt, and disbelief. James, he muttered, his fists clenching. It's my brother, isn't it? Robert nodded grimly. Yes, I'm sorry. For a moment, Liam couldn't breathe. The betrayal was deeper than he'd imagined, a knife twisting in his gut. His own brother, his wife, together. The realization sent a cold wave of despair crashing over him. What now? Liam whispered, his voice hoarse. He looked up at Robert, searching for some kind of guidance. Depends on you, Robert replied, his tone neutral but firm. You have the evidence. The next step is your call. Liam left the office in a daze, the folder clutched tightly in his hands. Each photo felt like a shard of glass cutting into his soul. The betrayal wasn't just Delilah's, it was James's too. The weight of it threatened to break him, but beneath the anguish, a spark of resolve began to burn. This isn't over, he thought, not by a long shot. That evening, the kitchen was awash with the soft glow of overhead lights, the hum of the dishwasher filling the silence. Liam stood by the counter, his hands gripping the edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. The folder from the investigator sat unopened on the table, but the weight of its contents felt like a storm brewing between them. Delilah entered, carrying a glass of wine, her expression calm and indifferent. "What's with the mood?" she asked, her voice casual as she set the glass down. Liam turned slowly, his gaze fixed on her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. She raised an eyebrow, taking a sip from her glass. "About what?" Without a word, Liam reached for the folder and tossed it onto the table. The photographs spilled out, their damning evidence laid bare between them. Delilah's eyes flickered over the images, her expression barely changing. "So," she said, her tone unnervingly calm, "you've been snooping." Liam's heart pounded, a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Snooping?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Is that all you have to say? I trusted you, Delilah. You've been lying to me, to our family." "Yeah." She sighed, almost bored, and leaned against the counter. "Lying? You're being dramatic, Liam. Things haven't been good between us for years. Don't act like you didn't see this coming." Her words felt like a slap. Liam's vision blurred as the betrayal sunk in deeper. "With my brother?" he choked out, his voice trembling. "You're having an affair with James?" Her lips curled into a smirk, her gaze cold. "James gives me what you never could," she said, her voice cutting through him like a blade. "Ambition, passion, life." The room spun. Liam's world, once solid and dependable, now felt like it was crumbling beneath his feet. His breath hitched as he tried to process her words, the images, the cold indifference in her voice. "Life?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We built a life together. We have a family." Delilah shrugged, swirling her wine. "And? You're a good dad, Liam. But as a husband?" She shook her head. "You're comfortable, predictable, safe. I wanted more." Yeah. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Before Liam could respond, Eleanor entered the kitchen, her heels clicking softly against the tiled floor. She took one look at the scene before her and sighed, exasperated. "What's going on here?" "Ask your son," Delilah said, nodding toward Liam. "He's upset because he finally realized our marriage isn't perfect." Liam turned to his mother, desperation etched across his face. "She's been cheating on me, Mom, with James." Eleanor's expression barely changed. She folded her arms and shook her head. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Liam, you're blowing this out of proportion." His jaw dropped. "Blowing this out of proportion? She betrayed me? With my own brother?" She clawed her eyes out and looked around to see who was there. Eleanor stepped closer, her tone firm but dismissive. "Marriage is complicated. Delilah made a mistake, but families work through these things. Think of Ethan and Chloe. Do you want to ruin their lives over this?" Liam stared at his mother, disbelief flooding him. "You're siding with her?" he asked, his voice breaking. "After what she's done?" "I'm siding with the family," Eleanor snapped. "You have responsibilities, Liam. Don't let your pride destroy everything we've built." The tension in the room reached a boiling point. Liam's fists clenched at his sides as he turned back to Delilah. "You don't even care, do you?" he demanded. "Not about me? Not about this family?" Delilah's eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "You want the truth, Liam? You never made me feel alive. James does." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Liam staggered back, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing tighter with every passing second. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, without another word, Liam grabbed his keys and stormed out of the house. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing in the cold night air. His mind raced as he walked to the car, his heart shattered into pieces. Anger, hurt, and confusion swirled within him, each emotion fighting for dominance. But beneath it all, a flicker of resolve began to burn. This wasn't the end, not yet. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a faint glow on Liam's face as he sat at the dining table, staring at the stack of bank statements in front of him. His coffee had gone cold, untouched. He rubbed his temples, his mind running through the steps he needed to take. This wasn't just about escaping Delilah's betrayal. It was about safeguarding his children, Ethan and Chloe, from the chaos that would inevitably follow. Taking a deep breath, Liam opened his laptop and logged into their joint accounts. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he began quietly transferring small amounts into a private account he had set up. He couldn't afford to arouse suspicion, not yet. That afternoon, Liam sat on the living room floor, helping Chloe with her art project. The little girl giggled as she smeared glue onto a piece of paper and pressed glitter onto the surface. "Look, Daddy," she exclaimed, holding up her sparkling creation. "It's you and me." Liam smiled, the warmth in his chest momentarily dulling the ache of his situation. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. You're my little artist." Her smile widened, and for a moment, the weight of his plans lifted. But as Chloe returned to her project, Liam's resolve hardened. He had to protect that smile. He had to shield her and Ethan from the storm brewing around them. Yet, over the next few days, Liam meticulously gathered evidence. He went through Delilah's emails, her texts, her credit card statements. Every photo, every transaction that tied her to James was documented and stored securely. He knew that if it came to a custody battle, he would need to prove her unfitness as a mother. Late at night, when the house was silent, he sat in his office, scrolling through old family photos. His eyes lingered on an image of Ethan sitting on his shoulders at a baseball game, both of them laughing with pure joy. Another photo showed Chloe fast asleep in his arms after a long day at the park. His throat tightened as memories flooded back, teaching Ethan how to throw a curveball, braiding Chloe's hair before school. These weren't just memories, they were promises. Promises he intended to keep. By the fourth day, Delilah began to notice Liam's distant demeanor. At dinner, she leaned across the table, her voice laced with irritation. "You've been quiet lately. What's going on?" Liam forced a smile, masking the storm beneath his calm exterior. "Work's just been stressful," he replied. "End of semester grading." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Eleanor, seated nearby, chimed in. "You should take some time off, Liam. Focus on your family. Delilah's been doing so much for all of you." Liam bit back a retort, instead nodding. "I'll think about it," he said, his tone neutral. Beneath the surface, his mind churned. They had no idea he was already planning his exit. The moment came sooner than he expected. One evening, as the kids played in the living room, Liam began packing. He worked methodically, choosing only essentials: clothes, important documents, a few of Ethan's favorite books, and Chloe's cherished stuffed bunny. He placed everything carefully into 2 duffel bags, his movements quiet and deliberate. Chloe wandered into the room, her small hands clutching a juice box. She tilted her head, her curious eyes fixed on the bags. "Daddy, why are we packing?" Liam froze, then forced a smile. "It's a surprise, sweetheart," he said, kneeling to her level. "Just an adventure. You, me, and Ethan. Won't that be fun?" Her face lit up and she clapped her hands. "I love adventures." "Me too," Liam said softly, hugging her tightly. His voice cracked slightly as he added, "You'll always be my adventure." That night, as the kids slept peacefully, Liam placed a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. The words were brief but deliberate. "I'm taking what matters most. You can't destroy it." With one last glance around the house, Liam picked up the duffel bags and carried them to the car. He strapped the children into their seats, careful not to wake them, and started the engine. The tires crunched softly on the driveway as he pulled away, the familiar home shrinking in the rearview mirror. As they drove through the dark, Liam's hands gripped the wheel tightly, his jaw set with determination. The hum of the car engine was the only sound as the miles rolled by. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Relief at escaping, fear of what would come next, but above all, a fierce resolve to protect his children at any cost. Chloe stirred in the back seat, murmuring sleepily, "Are we there yet, Daddy?" "Almost," Liam replied, his voice steady. "Just a little further, sweetheart." He glanced at the road ahead, the headlights cutting through the night. There was no turning back now. This was their new beginning. And the clock struck midnight, the house shrouded in silence. Liam stood in the kitchen, staring at the note he had left on the counter. His handwriting was firm, the words brief and deliberate. "I'm taking what matters most. You can't destroy it." He exhaled slowly, his heart pounding against his ribs. The duffel bags were already in the car. He checked his watch again, then moved through the hallway, his footsteps careful on the hardwood floor. Ethan and Chloe lay bundled in blankets, their faces peaceful in sleep. Gently, he scooped up Chloe first, cradling her in his arms as he carried her to the car. She murmured softly but didn't wake. Returning for Ethan, Liam paused briefly in the doorway of his son's room. The weight of the moment hit him. This wasn't just an escape. It was the end of the life he had built. He knelt by the bed, brushing a stray curl from Ethan's forehead. "I'm doing this for you," he whispered before lifting him into his arms. The children were secure in their seats, the car loaded, the engine idling quietly. Liam took one last glance at the house, the place where everything had fallen apart, and drove off. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. The headlights sliced through the blackness, illuminating the frost that clung to the edges of the asphalt. The hum of the engine was steady, almost soothing, but Liam's grip on the wheel remained tight. His thoughts raced as he navigated the quiet streets. Every turn felt like it carried weight. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. His mind replayed the sound of Delilah's cutting words, Eleanor's cold dismissal, the photos of James and Delilah together. But then he glanced in the rearview mirror, catching sight of his children. Chloe clutched her stuffed bunny, even in sleep, her small chest rising and falling rhythmically. Ethan stirred slightly, his lips moving as if caught in a dream. They were his anchor, his reason. The highway stretched out before him now, the faint glow of distant headlights far behind. The trees lining the road loomed tall, their silhouettes stark against the moonlight. The car felt like a bubble of safety, but Liam knew it was temporary. He couldn't stay in one place for long. Not yet. Chloe shifted in her seat, her voice a sleepy whisper. "Daddy, where are we going?" Liam glanced back, forcing a calm smile. "It's a surprise, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. We'll be there soon." Her eyelids fluttered shut again, and Liam returned his focus to the road. The weight of the journey pressed down on him, but he didn't falter. He couldn't. The miles passed in silence, but as dawn began to break, Liam's phone buzzed in the cup holder. His stomach twisted. He picked it up cautiously, his pulse quickening at the sight of Eleanor's name. It was a friend from the college he had gone to with Michelle Eleanor. Shortly after he'd left, She had already filed a report. The words on the screen were clear. Liam Peterson has abducted his children. Proceed with caution. Liam's chest tightened, his breath catching in his throat. Eleanor wasn't going to make this easy. The fight was far from over. The first email went out at dawn, its subject line sharp and attention-grabbing. Confidential evidence regarding James Peterson. Attached were the damning photos and detailed messages, each time-stamped and indisputable. Liam had taken care to ensure it landed directly in the inboxes of James's colleagues, supervisors, and key figures at his workplace. Within hours, the ripple effects began. By mid-morning, James sat in his office, pale and shaking, as his manager stood over him, a printed copy of the email in hand. "This is serious, James," the manager said, his tone low and icy. "Your actions have compromised the company's reputation. HR will be in touch, but don't expect this to end well." James stammered, his carefully curated persona unraveling in an instant. "This is a misunderstanding," he lied, his voice cracking. "It's personal. It shouldn't affect my job." His manager's gaze didn't waver. Personal scandals have a way of becoming public disasters. "Clean out your desk. You're suspended, effective immediately." Across town, Delilah's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from her real estate clients. Confusion turned to panic as she opened one after another. Screenshots of her texts with James, photos of them at the hotel, and Liam's carefully crafted summary of their actions had been circulated anonymously. "I can't trust you to manage my property anymore," one client wrote bluntly. Another message read, "Your lack of professionalism is appalling. I'm taking my business elsewhere." The blow to her career was swift and merciless. Within hours, Delilah's inbox was flooded with cancellations and demands for refunds. She sat at her desk, her perfectly polished nails trembling as she scrolled through the carnage. By late afternoon, James stormed into Delilah's office, his face red with fury. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, slamming the door shut behind him. Delilah looked up, startled. "James, I'm trying to—" "Your mess dragged me into this," he yelled, cutting her off. "Now my career's on the line. Do you have any idea what this is costing me?" She snapped, slamming her hands on the desk. "My mess? You were the one who couldn't stay away. If you had kept your distance—" "Oh, don't you dare put this on me," James shot back, his voice dripping with venom. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted me as much as I wanted you." The argument spiraled, voices raised, accusations flying. Each word they exchanged added fuel to the fire of their collapse. The walls they'd built around their illicit relationship were crumbling, leaving them exposed. Meanwhile, Eleanor sat in her kitchen, staring at her phone. The scandal was spreading like wildfire. Friends from her social circle were sending her the same damning messages and photos. Whispers about her family's disgrace were already making the rounds in their small, tight-knit community. When Delilah burst into the house, her face flushed and her hair disheveled, Eleanor didn't look up. "What did you do?" Eleanor asked coldly, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. Delilah threw her bag onto the counter. "Don't start with me, Eleanor. You're part of this family too. Fix it." "Fix it?" Eleanor laughed bitterly. "You think I can fix this? The entire town is talking about your affair. James's career is ruined. Do you realize what you've done to this family?" Delilah's jaw tightened. "You're blaming me? This wouldn't have happened if Liam hadn't been so weak." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Don't deflect. You made your choices. Now you're reaping the consequences." By evening, the fallout had reached its peak. James sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, his mind racing. His suspension was public knowledge. His phone had gone silent, the calls and texts from coworkers and friends drying up as the scandal spread. Delilah sat alone in her once bustling office, staring at the blank computer screen. Her career was in ruins. Clients had abandoned her in droves. Every attempt to salvage her reputation felt futile. The life she had carefully crafted was collapsing around her. "Great!" The irony was sharp and unforgiving. Their schemes to build something together, something forbidden, had backfired spectacularly. Liam's quiet, calculated moves had unraveled them completely. As the sun set, the echoes of their public humiliation lingered, a fitting consequence for their betrayal. For Liam, it was just the beginning. Liam's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, its vibration cutting through the quiet cabin. He glanced at the screen, frowning at the unexpected name. Amelia? His sister hadn't called him in years, their strained relationship reduced to the occasional polite exchange during holidays. Hesitating, he picked up the phone and answered. Liam? Amelia's voice trembled on the other end, a mixture of urgency and hesitation. We need to talk. It's important. He leaned against the counter, suspicion flickering across his face. Amelia, if this is some family loyalty lecture, I'm not interested. It's not that, she said quickly, her tone almost pleading. I know what's been happening, what Delilah and Eleanor have done. I've been keeping quiet for too long. I can't anymore. Yeah. Liam was silent for a moment, weighing her words. Why now? He asked, his voice guarded. Why would you suddenly decide to get involved? Amelia exhaled sharply, as if summoning the courage to speak. Because I didn't realize how far they were willing to go until recently. They've been planning to paint you as mentally unstable, Liam. Eleanor's already spoken to a lawyer. They want to take custody of Ethan and Chloe. Permanently. His breath caught, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. What? He managed to say, his voice shaking. They're using your escape as leverage, she continued, her voice heavy with guilt. Claiming you're erratic, dangerous. I overheard them talking about it when I visited Eleanor last week. They even have fake witnesses lined up, some of Eleanor's friends from her social circle. They're ready to back up her lies.